Watch out, let me get a shot. Where they at? Where they at?
Put on that rooftop. Hey! Give me a fucking 42 in the United States!
We're east of the riverbed. And, we're taking fire from the west. Roger, stand by, we're popping smoke. Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Welcome to the Combat Leadership Podcast. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Jeff Sabins, welcome to the Combat Leadership Podcast. I thank you for showing up. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, my friend. And how are you? How have you been?
Going great. I'm glad you had me on here, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while now, ever since we first contacted. This is
yes.
An awesome time.
Well, the feeling is mutual. As you know, the podcast, we talked a little bit before we hit record here, is all about taking your experiences and maybe your son or daughter listening to them one day when they're lance corporals or second lieutenant, or they haven't gone to combat yet, and something you may say may save lives of soldiers and Marines on the front line one day. So you got a lot of experience. I have followed you on LinkedIn. I know you've written a couple books. I've watched a lot of other podcasts that you were on. So you have a lot right up here that can benefit young guys. And the good thing about these episodes, these videos, is I don't know what the internet's going to look like 50 years from now, but whatever it is, these are going to be out there in some form or fashion. So with that, I'll shut up. Tell us a little bit about you so the audience knows. Obviously, they know you were Marine, combat experience and all that, but where were you born? Sports, just lead us up to all the way. Why did you enlist in the Marine Corps? Just give us a good, take a few minutes.
Yeah, so I was born in upstate New York, small town, no red lights, no fast food restaurants, just small town living. And I played football, I wrestled, track and field, just something to keep you active and keep you going. I wasn't no all-star athlete, I just liked to be in shape, And then I don't have a, like the last couple shows I've done, they always ask this question, and I don't have a great why I joined the Marine Corps story. I never planned on being in the Marine Corps. My whole thought process was going to college, being a conservation officer, and being outdoors my whole life. And then I ran into the recruiter at school one day, and within 10 minutes they had me hooked. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that recruiter deserved a good bonus that year.
Yeah, I love. I'm the same way. Both of my parents were in the Army. That's where they met. My dad was in for 3 years. My mom was in for 2 years, and they met there and actually got married. And I always had an affinity for the military, and I was going to probably join the Army after high school. And then a buddy of mine, I went over to visit him at his house, and his older brother was there who had done 2 tours in Vietnam as a machine gunner. And he goes, wait, are you going in the Army? Well, there he goes. He started like, why the hell would you do that? I mean, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I went to see the Marine recruiter, same thing. Oh, he didn't have to, it was basically, where do I sign, So cool.
I mean, I was only 17 at the time, so he had taught me into doing the DEP program for a whole year before I left for boot camp. So I don't know what happened, but it all worked out for me.
Yeah, I was 17 as well. My mom had to sign for me. And to be honest with you, I was not much of a student. That's an understatement. And I think my parents were worried about me. I was a good kid. I never got in trouble with the law, but I think they were like, he wants to go in the Marines? Where do we sign? You know what I mean? Structure, And it was the best move I ever made. And I'm sure you agree. So tell us about,
absolutely.
When did you go to boot camp? And then give us a synopsis of your Marine career.
Yeah, so I went to boot camp in 2004. As soon as I crossed the graduation stage, like literally walked off the stage, walked down the stairs, and got into the recruiter's car and went to boot camp. It just lined up perfectly like that. So there was no summer away from me. There was no, I mean, it was right to business. Boot camp, SOI, nothing, nothing crazy. You know, it was just one foot in front of the other, you know, get it done, try not to get yelled at. So, I mean, it was a pretty simple process for me to get through, mentally, I'd say, and physically. I was already in good shape, and mentally I was used to just being alone and getting stuff done and getting the mission accomplished so you can eat or have some warmth the next day. So I was a machine gunner. Best decision I ever made. Again, another decision that I didn't think through. It was just, you know, we were short on machine gunners that cycle. They said, if you want to be a machine gunner, raise your hand. And I just put my hand in the air. And I'm so glad I did that. I loved being a machine gunner more than anything in my career. You know, it almost trumps becoming a gunny, and that's hard for a lot of people to say. I loved being a machine gunner. So I went to 3-8 right away. 3-8, I did the Fallujah Karma deployment as a machine gunner in a turret in the weapons company. And that's in 2005. In 2006, I went to Ramadi. Again, I was a machine gunner in a turret for weapons company. And then in 2007, the 22nd MEU with 3-8. And we went to spend some time in Kuwait and spent some time visiting some places like a typical MEU. Then I got orders to Weapons Training Battalion. It's been a while since I've thought through this. Weapons Training Battalion at Stone Bay. I was the chief instructor of the base marksmanship training unit. So that was a fun time where I started my teaching journey at that point, I guess, of getting in front of people and instructing. After I left, and that's when I won the 2009 Hathcock Award, was during those 2 years at Stone Bay. After that, I went to 3-9, did the Marja Afghanistan deployment as a machine gun section leader. And then when we got there, I was with the India company. They had left some trucks behind. We had to man a couple trucks, so I ended up moving over and being a a patrol leader for a 3-truck section in Marja. After that, I went to SOI, did ITB for about a year, and then I spent my last 2.5 years at combat instructor school, so training the combat instructors. So that was an awesome time as well. Helped me with my teaching instructional journey. Then I went to MAR-4Com to be the training chief at the 3-Star Command, and that's when my dream deployment became available. And I fought and got to go to Somalia as a senior enlisted leader at Camp Baldogle. So that was an awesome experience as well as a gunny. And then my last unit was with 325 here at Johnson City at I&I duty station. So retired at 17 years because my son had a brain tumor at 2 years old. And so that was when I just got back from Afghanistan. So it was surgeries and brain surgeries and therapies and figuring stuff out for him. And every move that we did was hard on him with new doctors and new stuff.
Yeah.
And so I applied for TERRA in 2021 while I was at I&I, because Johnson City is literally an hour and a half away from our home here in Harrogate. And so the Marine Corps granted it to me. And so I retired in 2021, and now Carter has the same doctors, goes to high school. So it all worked out in our favor.
I'm not aware, and I bet a lot of the listeners, what is TERRA? Is that like an early retirement deal?
Yeah, that was a temporary early retirement authority. I think that's what the A was, authority.
Huh.
It was there for a while. I'm trying to think when it first started. It had to have been 5 years before I did it. And it was at 15 years. Starting at 15 years, you could apply for temporary retirement. And that was when it was really high. The numbers were high. And you know how the Marine Corps does. It gets high, we kick them out. Gets low, we beg them to come back, And so at that point, it was high. And then when the numbers dropped, they had stopped it. And then the year that I applied for it, they opened it back up, but only for extenuating circumstances, like me and my son, so, and I don't know if they're doing it right now or not.
So it's temporary at first, and then they say, okay, it's permanent. You are retired now.
Yeah. Well,
cool.
I guess just the temporary part is, yeah, exactly. So you're retired, you're under TARA from 17 to 20, and then when you hit your 20 year, then you're officially retired, Okay. And so it was from 15 to 20 years for the longest time, and then I applied for it at 17. And there's a lot of first sergeants and stuff that probably know a heck of a lot more, and I'm probably screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm just glad a program like that existed during my time, 74 to 98. I mean, the bottom line is if you didn't hit that 20-year mark, you weren't retiring unless you got medically retired.
Yeah.
And that's just a shame. So I'm glad to see that. So, well, anyway, Jeff, let's get into it here. I always start with some standard questions. If you were limited to just an elevator speech, your philosophy on combat leadership, what would you say?
Well, I think combat leadership is all about making the hard decisions, right? Hard decisions when there's no good options, because a lot of times people, like leaders want to make a plan, and they really like that plan to work. And so a lot of decisions are made based on the execution of that plan and keeping that plan intact. And I think a good combat leadership philosophy is making hard decisions when there's no good options, and then doing it fast enough so people stay alive. The hesitation, and we've been connected for a while, and you've seen a lot of the stuff that I post on my website and in my books called, Tempered by Chaos, and that is that's part of that philosophy is you can't hesitate and try to think through the best scenarios every single time. When you are in combat situations, you have to make these hard, fast decisions, the best of your ability, and then execute them. And if it's not going the way that it's supposed to be going, then you can make corrective action. But what you can't do is sit there and sit in your hands and wait for the perfect information.
Yeah. I love it. Well, as you know, Jeff, we discussed, about my background, retired Marine. And then I was an executive for 15 years in a pretty big company. And so I'm a leadership guy. I'm an executive coach. I write books. I teach people at every level, leadership and all of that. And across the board, I find that the very best leaders usually have had mentors, early mentors and role models and all of that. And I think that's applied. I mean, it certainly applied to me as a Marine. I think I was a better combat leader because of guys that I was exposed to when I was a PFC, when I was 17 years old. Are there any individuals that stick out in your mind, and not necessarily with you in combat, but shaped you in a way as a Marine that it really had a profound impact upon your abilities in combat?
I wish I could say yes. I wish I could have specific people that have helped me in those situations. And I think for me, at least, everything was just so fast for me. I mean, as soon as I got to 3-8, within 2 months, we were in Fallujah. There was no workup for me. There was no nothing for me. As soon as we get back from Fallujah, 6 months later, we're going to Ramadi. I mean, my career, I was blessed as a machine gunner to do machine gun stuff. Like a lot of machine gunners and a lot of infantry guys don't get to practice their skill craft. They don't get to go out there and do what they were trained to do. And for me, I was thrown in the fire as soon as I stepped through the door. And so now I've had great mentors that, in 2009, a sergeant major pulled me in, and I was, if you've watched my last show on the choices, not chances, I talked about how there was one day after my first 3 deployments, I was just having a hard time sleeping, and I went to BAS and went to medical, and within 10 minutes they had said, I had PTSD and put me on a bunch of medication to help me sleep. And that completely screwed my life up. That medication completely turned me into a different person. To the fact where I almost missed the birth of my son because the medication had screwed me up so bad. And
Wow.
I had walked in one time and one day and was told, hey, you're being medically retired. Never signed any papers, never was told. I just had this packet in front of me with a doctor that says, hey, you're 80% retired, you're getting kicked out. And I had no idea that was going on until a sergeant major pulled me in one day and was like, listen, you can make your own decisions. You don't have to follow every single thing that someone who is a higher rank than you tells you. He's like, you have the ability to think through what your decisions are that impact you in your life. And he's like, if you're going to let these guys kick you out without a fight, and that's what you want, I mean, that's the route that's going to happen. But if you want to stay in and you don't want this to happen, you've got to fight it. He's like, this is not who you are. You're letting the medication and you're letting these people make you believe that you are sick and you have all these things wrong with you. And that's just not the case. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're the 2009 Hathcock Award winner, so you're doing something right. And that changed my entire career. That changed everything for me in the Marine Corps. Because I was literally days from saying, yep, good, I'm out. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken.
Yeah, I love it. Well, on the same vein, so if I get this correctly, you've done 2 combat deployments to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan.
Yes. Yep.
And at least the first one, you were a Snuffy, PFC, Lance Corporal.
Yep.
So here's the question, Jeff. While you were on that first combat deployment, and you're talking Fallujah, right? Mm-hmm. Was that Fallujah 1 or Fallujah 2?
That was 2005. We were a weapons company. We were doing MSR security around, just surrounding it. So we had a 4-vehicle convoy that would do presence patrols and MSR security for 8 hours a day, looking for IEDs, looking for stuff like along that line.
So when you were on that first deployment, and you're wrong, I think your responsibility is to yourself and be a good machine gunner, be a good part of your team and all that. Were you able to observe anybody in a leadership role that was so inspiring or effective? It's like, if I ever get in charge as a squad leader or a team leader or a section leader, I'm gonna be like that guy right there. Was there anybody there that impressed you like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the vehicle commanders and our NCOs and they were all great Marines. I mean, they as soon as I stepped in, like, they took me under their wing and they treated me like one of their own. There was no hazing, there was no nothing. It was like, hey, we got a job to do, and it's a pretty big job. We need to, like, let's get it under control. And so the gunnies were great. It was just a great environment. I could not have been blessed any more than to get weapons company in 3-8. It was awesome.
I love that. I'm going to throw a side comment in here. I got interviewed by a guy named Assad Khan. And he published the first episode. I got 2 more in the can. And we got on the subject of hazing. And I think I'm going to invite guys like you to do a special episode on this, because when you just said there was no hazing or nothing, you know where I'm going with this. I'm out here, I'm listening, I'm reading about this stuff. And evidently at some point it turned into, when these guys came in from whatever you call it, School of Infantry or whatever, they called it boot drops. And they put these kids through hazing that would make the Russian army look like amateurs, They weren't allowed to, they had to have high and tights until they deployed. They had to call Lance Corporals. It was just the stuff that they were doing, the unannounced room inspections, basically just fucking with these young kids because they hadn't been to combat yet, like second-class citizens. And I got to tell you, and it became institutionalized, because I talked to a sergeant major who goes, well, Mike, it's always been that way. I'm like, no, it hasn't been that way. It's been that way since your career. Yeah. But I got to tell you, I came in 74, so theoretically, old Corps, that never happened to me. Now, good-natured joking around, you're carrying the 203 or the saw, that kind of stuff. You got guard duty, you got duty on New Year's weekend, yes, of course. But the stuff that I'm hearing now, it's like, whoo. So I would like to talk to guys like you. I don't want to get sidetracked during this, but I don't think it's productive at all, you know?
Yeah. If you look at like what 3-8 did in Ramadi and the Battle of Ramadi and the what we face and how well we were able to work together between units and between the companies and the things that we were able to do there, it goes to show like how tight we were as a group, and there was no need for it. We were just there. We had a job to do, and we knew what the job was because we've already been there and done that, and there was no time for anything else.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about combat leadership. The obvious question is, Jeff, you were obviously very successful peacetime Marine as well. You know, you did a lot of combat time, but most of your time was not in combat, like most Marines, like you said, some guys do. I know guys that did 30 years, never deployed to combat, you just got to be at the right spot at the right time.
Yep.
As I call it, and then when you're there, it's like, this ain't the right spot. You know what I mean? You can't wait to get out and hope you get out alive and all that. But do you think there's a difference between just general military leadership and then combat leadership?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think there is. I don't think it's the typical answers that you get of, well, garrison and general leadership is like PowerPoint classroom. Like, I don't think that's the case. I think that the difference is it goes back to decision making, right? Like when I talk to CEOs and team development with companies, the very first thing I tell them when we go through stuff is never make a decision in less than 24 hours. If you have the ability to think through and communicate and research and brainstorm, don't make a decision in less than 24 hours. At least give yourself 24 hours to stew on it and to make sure, hey, am I ready for this, whatever it is. And in combat, you don't have that ability. And that you have to make the decisions. You have to make them fast. You have to make them without all the perfect information. You don't have time to think through on it. And I think that's the difference. I think when you start trying to force combat leadership into garrison leadership, a lot of Marines like, hey, I'm a combat Marine, like this is beneath me and all this stuff. And when you try to force that and intertwine them, that's when mistakes happen in garrison that can affect you long term when you go to combat.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to raise this point. So I agree with what you said relative to garrison. I also, with my minute experience, certainly in combat, there are times, no, you got to make a decision now.
Yeah.
Like you don't even have a minute. You got to make it now, left or right. Where are you sending your Marines? But I don't think every decision in a combat environment needs that. And so what's your thoughts? I say that a good combat leader has to know when they need an instantaneous decision and when he has time. 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days in some case in the commanders. Are we really going to attack this objective? What are we trying, why don't we just secure it instead of assaulting it, neutralize it and all that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think it's still kind of like when you talk about executive leadership in garrison or in companies, right? I mean, small unit leadership decision-making is definitely going to be different from your executive leader or command-based decision-making. And I still think time is the essence. I still think the longer, of course, are we going to assault this objective or not? But the longer we take to make that decision allows them to reinforce that objective and doing the same thing for you and flipping the map and all that stuff. And so, I'm not going to pretend to know what it's like to be a commanding officer or a general officer making these decisions. It's definitely way beyond my scope. Yeah. But on the ground, I think on the ground, in the dirt, in the mud, theory is stripped away. You strip away all theory, and the only thing that's left is trust, clarity, and courage. That's what bases your decision making. Right? Do you trust this person to do the right thing? Yes or no? Does that affect your decision-making ability? It absolutely does. right? If I trust this small unit leader that's beneath me, then that defers what my decision making is, and it could just be deferred to, hey, what do you want to do? I trust your just, and that's just how it works. I do think that there is times when you are, I think platoon level is pushing it, but when you get to command level and higher, it goes to an executive level type decision-based making of, do I have time? Yes. Okay, let's make the right decision. Let's think through scenarios. But I think you can also get trapped in that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the tendency to overanalyze.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, you have observed a bunch of combat leaders in your time. So I'm going to ask you a two-headed question here. Are there any traits, habits, personalities, skill sets, attitudes that you found most of the very best combat leaders shared in common? And then I'm going to ask you about the bad ones, because let's face it, they're out there,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's four traits that I was really kind of leaning towards when I was thinking through this. I think the first one for sure is the calm in the chaos. That always to me was like, when they're talking on the radio and IEDs are going off and RPGs are hitting and you have 50 people on rooftops launching lead at you, like it's just chaos. And that person gets on the radio and it's just calm as ever. To me, that was the best thing for everybody else. When I heard that as a machine gunner over the radio, it calmed me down to hear, Gunny Slattery talking like that. I think the calm and the chaos, it helps everybody else around you, and it makes your decision-making ability that much more enhanced. And that goes into the second part of being decisive. Those who are decisive, those aren't hesitating, those who are like, and unfortunately, a lot of that is the decisiveness comes with, same thing as tempered by chaos, it comes with experience. And if you've been in those situations before, it helps you with that decisiveness.
Yeah.
And then being selfless, right? You're not worried about your career. And I've seen when we talk about the bad ones, I'll get more into that. You're not worried about your career or your outcome, what's going to happen to you. You're putting the Marines in front of you, and you're putting the Marines and their well-being in front of you, aligned with the mission, and you're not thinking about yourself. And then humble enough to listen to people, in those situations. When you get into 3-4 months into Ramadi, a place like that in 2006, where, the most dangerous place in the world at that point, I think you get to a point where you start to trust everybody, even though if you're in charge and you're the squad leader or the platoon sergeant or the section leader, there comes a point where everybody has done so much together and everybody has been in the same situations that if you're humble enough to listen to those other people when they have ideas that may have a better outcome and you help that influence your decision-making ability, I think that's a great trait as well. I hate the guys who are like, I'm in charge, you're going to do what I say, and then when something bad happens, they're the same ones that said, oh, well, you guys didn't listen to me, I tried to tell you to do this and that, and you have to be humble enough to listen to other people's ideas if there's time for it, in those situations.
Yeah. Well, how about the reverse side of the coin? And then maybe not necessarily bad leaders, but less effective guys that, if you had your choice and you never do, you know what I mean? You get who you're a Marine, you get the leaders that are assigned to you, but the one said, if you had a choice, I'd rather not serve under that guy's command right there, whether it's a squad leader or a captain or whatever the case. Any traits, habits, personalities, attitudes that most of the least effective or even bad ones shared?
Yeah, I mean, just in my experience from what I've seen, I think there's ones who are like overcome by fear. There's ones that are more concerned about their overall trajectory of their career and if this decision will impact their trajectory. And I think all that rolls into one simple thing. It's the leaders who view leadership as an authority instead of a responsibility. When they see leadership as an authority to them, they have the authority to do something, to make these decisions, to tell us what to do, to impact the objective, to do whatever. When they view it as an authority instead of a responsibility, that starts to go from being an effective leader to a non-effective leader or a poor combat leader.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the gunner you mentioned, Flattery or whatever his name was, he was obviously a private, a PFC, a Lance Corporal at one point. And I'm sure there were some that would look at him and say, that guy's going to be a combat leader someday. So where I'm going with this is the good combat leaders that you observed, that I observed, that we've read about, they were all know-nothing snuffies at one point, whether they were officer or enlisted. So where I'm going is, do you think with adequate mentoring, training, experience and all that the average Marine, if he stays in and assumes a leadership role, actually can be an effective combat leader? I'm not talking about Audie Murphy or, somebody that goes in, Medal of Honor, but can he be an effective squad leader, platoon sergeant, captain, platoon commander?
I mean, I do. I do think that. I know that goes against what a lot of people say. I do think everybody has the ability early on to become an effective combat leader. I think that there's things that happen to them that maybe prevent them from getting all the way there, right? It's like some traumatic experience that makes them, you can't control the fear, and the fear, hurts their decision-making ability or to put them back in those situations. Or they make a wrong decision early on in their career that turns out to be a bad outcome. And now they can't overcome that they've made that bad decision. Even though it may have been a bad outcome, that bad decision only can shape their decisions leading on to be even better. But I do think that everybody has the ability to become a good combat leader. And I think it has to be. I mean, I preach that every day with that tempered by chaos, right? I preach it every day of, you use this stuff, the good and the bad, to shape you, to shape your decision-making ability, to shape the way you treat people, to shape the way you lead yourself and you carry yourself. And if you allow it to make you stronger, if you allow it to learn, like I thought I was a badass after my first 3 deployments, and then I go to freaking Afghanistan and even more, and I was in charge, and I was able to do some really great things, and I got Purple Heart in Ramadi, and I've gotten how many accolades and decorations in my deployments. I mean, I thought I was an absolute badass, and I could not be touched after Afghanistan. But then my son has a brain tumor, and it humbles me, because there's a fight that I cannot control, and don't matter what I do or what type of decision-making ability I do. At that point, I was worthless. But I learned something from that. I learned something after that was over with, after the 36 days in the PICU, and after these years and years of therapies. I now am able to make decisions and help other people get through that same scenario. And so if we can view the hardships, the trauma, the bad things, and get through the other side, you then can use that information, that's precious information, to help other people get there. And I think that's what makes a good combat leader, right? I've been hit by numerous IEDs in trucks, and you can always remember the taste, the feeling, the air being sucked out, the dust in the air. I mean, you can always remember that. Once you get past the point where, hey, you know what, I can get through this, I can get hit by a dadgum bomb underneath my truck that should have took me out. If you can get through that, and you get to the other side, you now have valuable information to help other people get through that situation as well, if they so happen to be there. So I think that I think everybody has the ability to become a combat leader if they allow themselves to learn from these situations and not let it overcome them and cripple them.
And I want to ask a question, maybe make a point, see your thoughts, because you did touch on it. Those few guys that seem to have something in their past that makes them unable to control their fear. And that's a shame. And I saw one of those in my time, my brief time in combat. He was an officer, and he just wasn't built for it. And he got relieved, rightfully so. And I think he was happy to get relieved. He didn't want that responsibility. He was afraid, and he was making his Marines afraid too.
Yeah, and same thing. Like I've had one situation, and it was a staff sergeant, and I thought he was the Terminator. Like I thought he was awesome. I thought he was just untouchable. And it's just that first time when rounds came down range, and he curled up into a ball underneath the truck, and somebody has to make those decisions. And we had a sergeant that was able to step up. But you're right. That festers, that goes through your entire unit faster than anything when you allow that to happen. And we were just lucky enough to have an NCO to step up.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we're going to talk about fear and uncertainty, but I want you to just give a quick Cliff Notes thoughts. I mean, I think what you're saying to the youngsters out there that are going to be listening to this is there are people that have fear and they can't control it. They can't get over it. But I think everybody's going to have some element of fear. Your thoughts?
For sure. I think no matter what, there's going to be fear in every type of these combat situations. And I think that there is some people, and again, I still think everybody has the ability to be a great combat leader, but then there's like the fight or flight. You just don't know how you're going to react to certain situations. So there's those people where fear just takes over, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I still think that those Marines or those there can still be great leaders, just maybe not great combat leaders. They still can be great leaders. But everybody is gonna. I still go through situations of having fear and stuff along that line. Everybody will go through some sort of fear. It's just how they prepare themselves, or they push through it, or how they react to those situations.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a natural segue into my next series of questions. I'm going to ask you these questions because I know these were the questions I had as a young guy, wondering if I would ever go into combat and forget being a combat leader, just being in combat, and being a team, a part of a mortar squad or something like that, mortar section. So here's the questions that I think everyone thinks of at a minimum. Will I be too afraid to perform well under fire? And will I be so afraid that will I remember what I'm supposed to do? Like, will I remember how to be a good machine gunner? Will I be able to handle seeing my friends killed and wounded? Because as you know, killed or wounded, it's not like the movies where the guy gets shot, falls down, it's all clean and antiseptic. It's often very, very gruesome looking, and you can't replicate that until it actually happens in real time, I think. And then the last one is, will I be able to kill another human being when appropriate and when necessary? Your thoughts on these questions?
Yeah, I think it's subjective, right? Like it goes based off of of my experiences and how I feel. And of course I could be built different than a lot of people. And so, I think, am I going to be too afraid to perform under fire? I think, yeah, everyone should experience some sort of fear. I mean, there is people out there that have no fear over anything, and it kind of changes the way they do things. But I definitely think you're going to have fear. And if you are able to channel fear into action, I think that is that's how you overcome that, or at least push through that moment. I think that's where it boils down to, is when that fear hits, do you channel into action and you move forward and continue to do what you were trained to do, or do you freeze and sit there? And I think that's where the training comes in, and the mental toughness. And I think you can do your best to prepare for that. But I think it's experience heavy as well. At least for me, it's experience heavy. From what I've seen, is the first or second time you get into a good combat fight, sometimes it takes a leader to come over and grab you by the shoulder and throw you forward, and then it kicks you into gear. And then when that same instance happens again, you are already getting into action, right? I mean, I think that's part of it. We'll all remember what to do. I think the same thing applies. I think if you've trained well, and if your leaders trained you well, and not the let's go outside and do gun drills for 2 hours. I'm talking about actual training and preparing for combat the way you're supposed to train as you fight, get outside the box and go and do that. I think you're fine. I think you're always going to do what you're supposed to do. Sometimes you may need a helping hand to say, hey, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And someone can help you get in that direction. But I think if leaders are training their Marines the way they're supposed to, and it doesn't happen that often. It really does not. That is my biggest complaint about some of this stuff is it can't just be going out and doing gun drills. It can't just be sitting in a room going over PowerPoints and looking at maps. You have to get out there and push yourself past exhaustion and train as you fight and get out there and prepare yourself. Handle seeing friends killed or wounded. I think there's two types. I think there's the people who see it, they process it, they finish the mission, and then they go through it, and then they have their hard time of overcoming. And then I think there's the people that see it happen and they just lose all control at the moment. Right. I think there's two situations there. And I know I've been through both of them myself. I mean, when one of my brothers, when in my truck, when Nick got killed in my truck in Ramadi, I was pissed. I mean, I was fired up. And so, again, the same Gunny Slattery, it took him to grab me and like pull me in close and say, hey, we ain't got time for this now. We got to go or else, we got to get the mission done. Well, there's going to be more, so we can't focus on this right now. And so, that calmed me down. And then after that, I he was close. He was in my truck for an entire deployment. And so I think that kind of hit me a little bit harder than maybe other people that, weren't next to me and trained out me every day. And so I think you always are always going to live through it. I mean, you're always going to relive through that stuff in the future. You're always going to replay those moments no matter what, even years and years and decades later. But I think at the moment, I think time will tell. You'll see how you react when it happens. And then able to kill another human being when necessary. Again, this is the one I think is subjective. For me, I never had any issues. I didn't think about it. It was, for me, it was, I need to save the people to the left and right of me, no matter what. And that means that I have to do this in order to protect them. So for me, it was a no-brainer. It was, I was a machine gunner. Everybody, the way I seen it, everybody depended on me for overall protection. Everybody depended on me to put rounds down range, whether it was the Mark 19, the 50 cal, the 240. You know, if I, you know, I was a great machine gunner. I mean, I'm just gonna, like, I loved it. I was an awesome machine gunner, and people were glad for me to be in that turret on a gun when we got into a fight, you know. And so for me, I think that was my mentality: is I am the protector. What do I have to do to protect my brothers and sisters in arms? You know, and so that's just how I viewed it when it came to that.
Yeah, I have a technical question for you. I honestly don't know because I retired in '98, so I'm so dated, Jeff. We talk about being a machine gunner and all that in the turret. What machine gun were you actually using? I'm curious. What weapon?
So in Fallujah, I was on a Mark 19 all the time. And then in Ramadi, that was on a 50 cal and a Mark 19. Okay. I mean, I was lethal with a Mark 19. I mean, I had a lot of trigger time off, not even just in combat, but on ranges. Like my unit, like I said, I was blessed with a great unit and a great platoon, a great company. I mean, in my book, you know, one of the stories I talked about was a guy shooting an RPG out of a 7-story window, and like I pulled the trigger in 2 rounds from the Mark 19, 2 grenades go right through that window. Like I was lethal with that thing. So people were glad to have me.
You know, a little bit of trivia here. My dad worked for the government. He worked at Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey, and he was a weapons tester, weapons and ammunition tester, and he was involved in the testing of the initial Mark 19s.
Really?
And when I was in Beirut, there were 5 Mark 19s in existence. They hadn't gone to the fleet yet. They were at Picatinny Arsenal. And somehow the Picatinny Arsenal and the Marine Corps, 3 of them got sent to Beirut. And I didn't know what they were. And I was away from most of the Marines, but a couple of my buddies had them in their platoon area. So the first time a Mark 19 was ever used in combat was in Beirut, Lebanon. And suffice it to say, it terrorized the terrorist, terrorized him. Yeah, yes, exactly. So I love it. So listen, I
would love to get a chance to get back in there out in the range and shoot that thing. I'm sure it's changed a little bit since then. I mean, I'm sure they've improved the vertical cam assembly and stuff like that, but I would love to get back out there and get on that.
Yeah, what a weapon. You know, it makes you wonder how people did things without it. You know, without it. So anyway, you've alluded to this a couple of times about really you've been talking about things that require discipline and all that. And this is a controversial topic, always has been since the Roman legion times and all that. The topic of discipline. And there is things that we do in garrison. You know, as Marines, we're supposed to look good, be good, you know, an attitude of excellence and maxing out at everything we do. But a lot of that, when I was a Lance Corporal, PFC, I didn't, why do we have to stand inspections? What's the obsession with him? Blah, 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 you know. And the older guys, now when I went in, Jeff, there were 3 war veterans there, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And one of them said, we make you do all of this stuff. First, we don't want you running around like slobs. So you got to be in shape. There's no fat Marines. You got to, you know, get a haircut and all that. But when you go to combat, you know, when I was on Guadalcanal, the guy told me, you know, we certainly weren't shaven and we had no haircuts and we were filthy. Literally our you know, they called them dungarees back then. Our dungarees were rotting off us, you know. But we still had to have the discipline to clean and oil our machine guns, our weapons. We were filthy, but our weapons were spotless and all of that. So where I'm going with this is, you know, you've experienced it as a young guy being forced to do these things in garrison, things that most of us referred to as chicken shit or, you know, remfish, you know, these remps, they don't get it, you know. So you know what I'm talking about, and then you were a combat leader. Talk about the things that you didn't really see the sense into as a PFC, but then you understood very quickly 2 months into combat, you were required to exercise self-discipline and discipline. Like you're a machine gunner, you were in charge of that machine gun, the cleanliness of it. I'm sure you were getting inspected and BAMS to the S and BAM system and all that. So you know where I'm going with that. I'll shut up. Your thoughts on, did these seemingly chicken shit things that the young Marines always rebel against, do they have a purpose, and does any of that discipline apply in a combat environment?
Yeah, I mean, you say controversial, and I agree. I mean, I think a lot of people are back and forth on this, and I'm one of the ones that say yes, they absolutely do, and I really. I don't ever think of myself as ever a garrison Marine, right? I mean, when I came back from my deployments, I was training people how to go and fight for deployments. Like everything in my whole career was based around combat or preparing people for combat. So I always stayed in that mindset. And I still think that stuff has a place. But I don't think, and I think what you said was perfect. You know, you said one of your Marines told you why we do this, and this is the reason why. I think that is the part that people need to pay attention to. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me and say that the reason I'm getting a haircut is because my gas mask won't work. You know what I'm saying? Like, or the reason we shave our face. Like, don't make up stuff that is going to sound combat effective to just make me shut up. You know, I've never agreed with that. I've always agreed with tell the truth, tell them why we're doing it. And if they understand why we're doing it, you'll have a better reaction to them doing it. And that only makes discipline better. You know, the biggest thing that combat does is like chaos exposes cracks. Lack of discipline makes those cracks bigger. So we got to be able to do, like, if I tell you to get a haircut every single Sunday, and if you're doing that every single Sunday, that's something that I don't have to worry about. And I know that you're following directions and you know to get it done. And you're one of the ones that you can be dependent on. Hey, this has to get done, get it done. So if I tell you to get a haircut every Sunday and you just don't get a haircut and you're just like, I'm not going to do it. So if I in combat tell you to, clean out the truck every 4 days, I can't trust you to do that either. You have to. I do think this stuff comes into play. It's just like inspections, right? Like, and again, I was never, I retired as a gunny. I never was a first sergeant. I never was in a company along that line. I never served I never was a company gunny either along that line. I was at MAR4Com as a gunny, so I was a training chief up there. And then I went to I&I, when I went to Somalia and stuff like that. So I never was the guy in a company situation to where I was working with the first sergeant, with the CO and doing this kind of stuff. So, I don't have that direct experience, but I do know as the young Marine, I would rather just be told why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Right up front. And not the haircuts, Marine, you're Marine, we gotta get haircuts. It's nothing freaking new. From the moment you step on the yellow footprints and that dude grabs you by the head and shaves you bald, a haircut is a haircut. The people who don't want to get a haircut, they're just the ones that want to be difficult because they just want to be difficult. And if they think they look good with that low reg haircut anyway, there's something wrong with them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're the ones who are defying the haircut rule are just trying to be in defiance. But everything else.
Go ahead.
But everything else, when it comes to like the discipline, the inspection, the reason we do drill is because drill directly reflects into how we do. Like, we're not drilling in combat, 10 abreast and marching forward. No, that's for a different reason. We're doing that because of discipline, And are you able to go out there and do what you're supposed to do and stay in line and follow that it's a whole different thing. Don't make up things on why we're doing it. Tell them the truth. So that way we all can be better in combat in the long run.
I agree with that. And I do think you've touched on something important, and I want to throw my 2 cents in and give you another chance to expand upon it, Jeff. I think that a lot of this garrison stuff that we do, there are reasons why we do it in peacetime or combat. As far as the personal appearance and all that, I can show you pictures of me in a combat environment where I ain't looking too inspection ready. I ain't shaved. I didn't have the ability to shave. I hadn't had a haircut in a while. My hands are in my pockets. My uniform is filthy. But when I had the opportunity, me and my Marines, we looked as much as like U.S. Marines as we could under the conditions. If I got back to the area and there was water, I would shave. I would clean my ass a little bit, that kind of stuff and all that. But I do think in peacetime, especially right now, you've got a lot of, let's face it, there are lieutenant colonels now and first sergeants with no combat experience. And so they don't have hey, listen, when I was in Ramadi, this is why we do these things, because of this. They don't have that. So I think there's a tendency on a lot of them to say, just shut up and do it. Or they say, hey, we do this because it'll make you a better combat Marine. And even the snuffy with no combat experience can think to himself, all right, I ain't been in combat, but that's bullshit. I don't believe that, So I do think there's an obligation to explain things to Marines. And if you can explain it well, they'll at least do it. They may not like doing it, but they'll understand why they're doing it. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons why this so-called chicken stuff in garrison, Remfish stuff, guys that are focused on the wrong priorities. I think that's why that attitude pervades, is because these Marines are being forced to do something. They can't see the logical connection between looking good in uniform, being in shape, really being in shape, and now in a combat environment, they don't have time to supervise PFC Sabins to make sure he's got his full ammo load in the truck, and that he's got his what's that for the mod deuce, the tool, the headspace and timing tool. Like, what do you mean you don't? I don't think they have that anymore. But what do you mean you don't have that? What do you mean you don't have your cleaning rod? You don't have your, this stuff like that, And then as far as the physical condition, which we'll talk about later, I am aware of guys that, commanders that told me the guys that were just hanging in there physically in peacetime, those were our heat casualties in Iraq. Because now we're in 120-degree weather. It's 110 degrees at night. We're always sweating. And those were the guys that we couldn't count on early on. They were a drag on unit effectiveness because we had to medevac them, because they couldn't do the sustained load and the heat and all that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on some great points, and I think we need to get back to what is the overall mission of the Marine Corps. I mean, down and dirty, like what is the overall mission? Why is there a Marine Corps in existence? And I think that gets forgotten quite a bit. And you're right, there are leaders out there who have never been to combat, and they just not comfortable enough to say we're doing this because, in combat, this is why, this could get you killed, or this is important, or along that line. The shut up in color is never an effective leadership tool. It's never an effective engagement to get people. But at some point, we got to start thinking outside the box in getting to what the mission is. What is the overall mission? And it happens all the time, right? Units that aren't deploying and haven't deployed in some time hardly ever do deployment type training. And that's just that's just how it gets to. So bring in some, if my school or my company, or my civilian company wants to do a suicide awareness training, right? And what do we always do? We hire somebody to come in that has experience with suicide prevention, or is typically a parent who lost a child to suicide, and they come in and they talk to people, right? So that's what these units can be doing. They can bring in people who have been in combat to come in and talk to these Marines and say, hey, you know, I've been in your shoes, never deployed before, and then this happened. Because you just never know when that next thing is going to happen, and you've got to deploy. I mean, I preach it all the time, because it just seems like everywhere I go, bad crap happens. You know, like I go to Somalia and Baladogo, I haven't been attacked for 2 years, nothing's going on, everybody's chill, hanging out, and then when I get there, you know, we get mortared and get attacked. You know, like bad stuff just happens. And so my mentality has always been, no matter where you go, no matter what happens, you always got to be prepared for something bad to happen. And the moment you get complacent, that's when it's going to happen. And so what is the mission of the Marine Corps? What are we supposed to be there to do? And then that we need to train for that. And the garrison stuff does have its purpose in there. Just like, you know, you said it too, like when you all found water and whatnot, just like in Marja, we didn't have showers. I didn't shower at all that whole deployment. I mean, my wife sent me a shower bag to get heated up, and the moment I hung it up and tried to warm water, they shot it, right? Like there was no chance for me to get cleaned up. But the moment we went to one of the main bases, what's the first thing everybody did? They all went, they got showered and cleaned up, they shaved their face, they shaved their head off, because in combat, that stuff just it prevented you, right? You're always itching and scratching your head, and your Kevlar don't fit right, and it's, you know, so everyone, there was no fighting people to line up for haircuts then. We're fighting to get in line. So, I mean, all that stuff plays into it. You just got to look at the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish and what our mission is.
Yeah, I want to follow up with one last question, maybe at the risk of beating a dead horse on this. So my experience has been two things I want to talk about. You know, the people that are in today and watching this episode, they need to listen to guys like you. So that's why I'm doing these episodes, so that first sergeant or gunny who hasn't seen combat, but let's face it, if he goes, he's going as a leader. He's not going as PFC Sabins. He's going as Gunny Sabins. You know what I mean? And that's a whole different ball of wax. And so I say they have to be students of their profession, and they have to read and talk to guys like you so that they can kind of fly on the shoulders of eagles, so to speak, you know what I mean, and learn. It's one thing that you're not there. Can't blame you for not being in combat yet. But I can absolutely blame you if you haven't tapped into the knowledge and wisdom of the ages, because some of these lessons are timeless. So that's the first thing. I wanted to see your thought about professional education, self-education. You're not going to get enough from the Marine Corps or the Army as far as courses go. And then secondly, do you think, here's what I want you to opine on, Jeff. I say all else being equal, individuals that have self-discipline in units that are made up of individual soldiers and Marines that have self-discipline, and they have been required to meet standards, they will perform better in combat than the slack individuals and slack units. I don't think there's a combat genie out there that says, okay, shitbirds, now you're here, boom, here you go. You're going to be a dynamite Marine, and you're suddenly disciplined, and you're going to be trustworthy and reliable and dependable. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so the first part is, you know, a leader's a leader. And I'm with you. Like, just because these guys aren't combat leaders doesn't mean they're not a good leader. You know, they just haven't had the opportunity to go yet, and they've not been called upon or been in the place where it's happened. You know, and it doesn't mean they're not a good leader. I know plenty of people who haven't deployed who are outstanding leaders, and I would follow them in any combat situation ever, and they've yet to be there. You know, and you're right that, you know, you can learn by diving into the books, or, for us, it was always told, read books, and, that's one of the, like General Mattis, I've always took that from him. And my home library is full of nothing but books on war and memoirs. And my wife is tired of Amazon packages coming in. I mean, I literally am addicted to these books. I have so many of them. And just like reading into that stuff. But now, past that point, where it wasn't for, when I was a PFC, there wasn't so much of this. Is the podcast, is these shows that you can throw on in your car and listen to this stuff. I mean, you can learn a lot from just listening to other people's or reading other people's experiences. And then if you're a good leader, when you get to combat, a lot of times it just means you're a good leader, but faster. You just do it much quicker, And then the discipline, the unit discipline, the unit discipline, I don't think is because the Marines are better than the other units. Once again, I think it's the leaders have found a way to convince them to do that. And that's what great leaders do. Great leaders take a bunch of people and they convince them all the same thing, that this is the mission and this is why accomplishing this mission is good, not only for the leader, but for everybody. And they get everybody on the same page and want to accomplish that mission. And it goes by, once again, not lying to them, not making crap up, not just yelling because you're in a position of authority. It's not, leadership isn't authority, it's a responsibility. If you treat them right and you treat them the way they're supposed to be, and you give them all the information, you communicate well. I mean, I'm telling you, like, when I first started getting out and doing team development and talking to companies and talking to units, there was 3 things that I thought were part of a great philosophy, and it was faith, trust, and courage. 1, the unit has to have faith in their leaders. Not that they're outstanding leaders, but that those leaders have their back, they care for them, they truly want the best well-being for the Marines ever, no matter what. If you can get a unit to believe that, they'll follow them anywhere. Trust, as in trusting the people to the left and right. So if me and my buddy are out there and I'm up, I'm seeing me, I'm down, I have to trust that he's going to do what he has to do, so that way I can focus on what I have to do, and then that buddy trusts me that I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. There has to be trust in each other. And then courage to take on the hard task. And that's where it fails a lot of times with these people when it comes to unit discipline, right? It's the courage to do the hard thing. Nobody wants to do the hard stuff. Nobody wants to go empty out to QuadCon. Nobody wants to go and do the armory working party. Nobody wants to go and pick up trash around the building. Nobody wants to go and clean up the barracks or do the inspections, or nobody wants to do that stuff, but you need people who have the courage to go and do that. And once you have people that are like, oh my gosh, well, if he's going to do it, then I'll do it. Oh, well, you did it last week, well, I'll do it. And once that starts happening, it's amazing how quickly your discipline will rise. I mean, it's when people start saying, and it starts with the leaders, right? Because how many staff NCOs or lieutenants are like, man, I don't want to do duty this week. Let me go pay somebody else to do duty. And now they're getting out of their duties and not doing what they're supposed to do. That trickles down to everybody else. And leaders don't even see it. They don't even see that that's happening. But, as well as I do, the Lance Corporal Underground, that's the most powerful organization in the world right there. So
there's no doubt about it. And I'll ask you, here's my thoughts on what you're saying. It's never the Marines' fault. It's never the Marines' fault that they're not meeting standards. It's always the leaders. And I'm 69 years old. My first leadership role was as an 18-year-old squad leader. That's how bad off the Marine Corps was back then. You know what I mean? It wasn't because I was that good. I was just next in line. And so I've been in the leadership game a long, long time, Jeff. And I always say, it's not rocket science. as goes the leaders, so goes the unit. Always. And you show me a slack, undisciplined, less effective organization, whether it's in business, athletics, school, whatever, it's a direct reflection of their leaders' attitudes. 100%. And so my thoughts to these folks listening to this, if you're in charge, have some pride, whether you're a team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, whatever, even if you're not blessed with the best leadership above you, you have an obligation to be the very best leader and to produce the very best unit that you're in charge of. No excuses. Your thoughts?
And it goes right back to, once again, leadership is a responsibility, not an authority. It always goes back to that. I mean, I always hated why are we doing this? Well, because I'm the staff sergeant, I told you so. If you just explain to people right off the bat why they're doing it and what's going on, they're going to do it. I mean, the whole yelling and the I've earned this rank and I've earned this position and you listen to me because, I have a bigger chevron than you. Like, it's insane to me. It really is. It really is insane to me that people could act that way. And if you want to be a good leader, spend more time out there with the Marines and less time in the office. Get out of the office, get out there with the Marines and see what they need, see what they're doing, see what they need work on, see where they need help. I mean, there's just so much you can do as soon as you get out of the office. Just like they talk, it's like that principal that's going viral on TikTok and Facebook Reels and stuff right now, that principal who closed down his office in the school, and now he has a desk that he roams around the school with, and he's going viral. Why is that? Well, it's because he's breaking the norm. He's getting out of the office. He's going out with his teachers and with his students, and it's making an impact. You got to get out there and be with them. And that's the only way you're going to learn where you got to improve on and how to get better effectively, and unit cohesion and discipline is get out of the office and get out there with the Marines.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I want to touch again, we've already talked a bunch up front about fear, and I want to talk again and give you a chance to lay some more wisdom on us, Jeff, when it comes to fear and uncertainty. Again, the question, pre-combat, I've never been in combat. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to be effective, do my job? And you've already shared some of your personal experience. And I want to ask, is there any more advice you have for pre-combat soldiers and Marines and sailors or whatever, anything they can do to better prepare and maximize the chances that they're going to do well, especially during their initial combat action?
Yeah, 3 words: shrink the unknowns. If you can shrink the unknowns, everything else can fall into place. And that, so what does that mean? So equipment, the standard drills, how to read a map, all the stuff that you can control, work that to death. The things that you can control, make that a priority. So if you can shrink the unknown stuff, that will make your job and your life so much easier. And it used to drive me crazy, even in leadership positions, when we'd get to fly into a new tour, a new place, and you go onto the camp and like all this stuff that we had no idea was going to happen. We didn't know there's going to be trucks left behind. We didn't know that this was going to happen. If you can shrink that and get rid of all the unknowns as much as possible, it just makes your life easier. And so getting out there and perfecting certain things, a lot of leaders, and myself included, I was one of these guys, and I was to blame as well. Like I'm a guy that likes to plan and I like to plan very religiously, and I like to write stuff down. I like to write journals. I like to think through thoughts. I'm really like, I'm a guy that likes to know what I'm going to do. And then when that plan doesn't happen, it throws me off my game, and I've had to adjust my style quite a bit, you know? And so that's the thing where if I could go back and just work on the stuff that I could control, work on the stuff like gun drills, not just standard gun drills from the Marine Corps, but gun drills where I would see in combat, like you know, one of the stories in my book about how many times we had a problem with a Mark 19 with the vertical cam assembly coming unlatched and the Mark 19 malfunctioning, and how many times we had to go through that in combat situations. I would go back and spend so much more time working through that specific drill only, and it would have saved countless hours of mishap in combat situations. You know, so if I could just shrink the unknowns as much as possible to where the only thing I have to worry about when I get into combat is the unknown stuff that I didn't know was coming, it would make my life so much easier, and I wouldn't have to worry about the stuff that we could have worked on before ever getting there and perfected.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, we've all heard of the term fog of war, and I think Clausewitz was the one centuries ago that described it. I'm paraphrasing here, Jeff, as, you know, you get in combat and this fog of war happens, and it makes the seemingly most simple tasks seem almost impossible. So is there something called the fog of war? What is it? In other words, you got a battle plan, your squad or your team's gonna do this, and you get out there and guess what? It seemed easy in planning, but it's not. You didn't expect this, and you got to be able to adapt. Is the fog of war real? And what's your thoughts about it? How can people expect it? How do they counteract it?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% real. I mean, comms go out all the time. Dust outs happen. Reporting conflict, right? You know, the wrong information comes through comms. You know, the fog of war is essentially you are never going to have the full picture. Never, ever is the full picture going to be available to you. And so what the fog of war does is it creates the danger of a leader waiting too long for clarity, waiting too long for the full picture to appear before they make their decision or before they ever do anything. That's when it becomes dangerous, because you're never, ever going to have the full perfect picture. It just ain't going to happen. So how do you train for that? I think that people need to do more train as you fight scenarios based on, hey, this will never happen. If you think that this will never happen, then train for that, because it's going to happen. Yeah. You know, reach out to guys who've been to multiple deployments and say, hey, this is a training exercise I want to do. Could you go through and develop a few scenarios that you think I would never expect coming? I'm telling you, there's guys like me who would love to sit down and analyze that and try my hardest to stump your ass. You know what I'm saying? Like, we would love that. And it's not like I'm going to say, hey, that's $1,000 for my time. No, I would love to sit there and go through some TDGs and try to stump you and say, here you go, here's my thoughts, and let you work through that. I mean, there is an absolute plethora of resources to you. And it's every combat veteran out there in the United States right now. And I guarantee 90% of them would say, yep, here's my thoughts, right? So you have to go out there and say, and we never did it, right? Like when you go to CACs, you go and do these unit inspections and you go get evaluated, you know, it's just like they're always talking about, and they're always basing their evaluations on the decisions of the leaders. But the decisions are always known. We always know what's going to happen. You're always preparing for that same thing. We never throw in there situations like, hey, by the way, you just lost communication with your company commander. You're no longer going to be coached by your company commander there, second lieutenant, because you know that's what happened. They just got coached by the other company commander and said, hey, go this way. This is what you're going to do. So take away the radio, or take away something. Take away the point man who's been planning for this the whole time. You have to do something where they have focused their main planning, take away that front aspect, and it throws everything off. That's the fog of war.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I want to talk about another topic, very important, called mental toughness. Hard to define. Some people call it the warrior spirit and all that. And I know you possess it in spades. You've seen people that did possess it. I'm sure you saw people that didn't really possess it and all that. So what's your philosophy on this critical aspect of what I say of any warriors, much less a leader, but any combat warrior? It's got to be mentally tough. How important, first of all, do you agree? And how important is it for individual warriors to be tough, mentally tough, self-reliant, to endure the rigors of prolonged combat? Because, Jeff, a lot of guys during combat, it's one mission. That was during my era, boom, grenade, gone, But you were doing it day after day, like thousands of young fellas, out in Afghanistan and Iraq, day after day. And I think it takes a certain mental attitude to say, all right, we had a rough day today. We lost a guy. And guess what? We're going right back out tomorrow in that same environment. So I'll shut up and listen to you talk now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to like one of the things I mentioned earlier with Carter. I was under this impression that I was unbreakable. I was just this warrior that couldn't be touched. And that is the wrong mindset to have, because when you walk around talking and thinking that you're like this unbreakable machine, you break even harder by living that way. And so mental toughness you're right, is huge. I think it's being self-reliance without being isolated. The instances like in Ramadi, we'd go out on dagger missions where you have to find IEDs. IEDs are horrible. IEDs are the biggest mental, other than snipers, I'd say, is one of the biggest mental constraints that you have. Is you're driving around, you never know when you're going to drive over an IED and it's going to blow you up. They're everywhere. You never can plan for it. You can plan a mission and you plan your route, and your entire mission relies on you getting there. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to encounter some sort of IED along that route, and it throws everything off, and you have to figure it out. But I don't know how many times my truck has been hit by an IED. The truck is destroyed. It has to get towed back to base. And then it's, all right, well, here's a new truck. Get in this new truck and get back out there. And it takes a lot for you to sit there and say, okay, well, I just got blown up, 30 minutes ago. Is it going to happen again? Am I going to be able to do this? And it's hard to do. And at some point, especially in Ramadi for me, at some point I got to this mental state of I'm going to die. I know I'm not going to make it. There's nothing I can do to survive. And then all of a sudden, the way that I acted towards things and the way I approached missions was different, and it helped me in a way. And I'm not saying that people need to go out there and these young Marines need to go out there and be like, just accept the fate that you're going to die. I think that's a very stupid thing to tell anybody. But I think I'm confusing at that point. I confused my mind with accepting I was going to die for mental toughness. I didn't want to die. I wasn't just like, hey, I'm whatever. If I'm going to die anyway, let me just go walk over that IED. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I think what I really went through was I got to a point where my mentality was there's some things you can't control. If you keep working towards the things you can control and you keep doing what you're supposed to do, you're going to be fine. But there's some things that's outside your control. If you don't focus on that stuff, focus on what you can control and get through your day. So, at the time I'm thinking, hey, I've accepted this fact that I'm not going to make it through this deployment. But in all reality, that was me accepting mental toughness as, hey, you can get through this. You just got through that IED. You got a new truck. You're out here. You just got to keep going along. You can get through this bad stuff that happens. And then, eventually you're tempered by chaos.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you for those thoughts. I love them. I got two questions for you. When we're talking about this mental toughness, some people call it the refuse to lose mentality, resolve in the face of adversity. So the first question is, how can this be developed in warriors, not just combat leaders, but warriors in general? And then the second question that's very closely aligned is, how do you develop the appropriate level of aggressiveness and fighting spirit in a warrior? What did you see? What worked? What's your advice to these folks?
Yeah, I think the refuse to lose concept can be, I think it's a hard place to get to. I really do. My personal opinion is it's a huge advantage to people, but it's extremely hard to get to that point outside of certain conditions. You have to push yourself past a breaking point. You see it in sports all the time. You see it in competitions. You have to push yourself past the breaking point to where your body and your mind are both in agreement that you can do this, you can get to this point. And it's very hard. And it's not like, a lot of people confuse it with like, let's just go out on a 10-mile run and I'm going to be super tired and I'm going to see how long I can go. I'm not talking about endurance. I'm talking about pushing your body past a breaking point. I'm talking like you don't sleep for 3 days and you've had one MRE in the last 17 hours and you're still grinding along and taking shots and all this stuff is happening like that. You're pushed past the breaking point to where you can overcome it. And it's not a safe place to be. And so I'm also not encouraging people to go out there and not sleep for 3 days and not eat food. I think it's a dangerous place to be. But I think once you reach that point, everything else becomes superficial. I relate it to completely different kind of relation, but I've always said this about Marines. When you first get Marines out of SOI or they come to SOI out of boot camp, I swear you cannot put any Marine in front of a daggum presentation and them stay awake. You can't do it. They cannot stay awake. If someone's up there giving them a presentation, you're walking around smacking heads, telling people to stand up, it does not matter. But then when you get to a bunch of staff NCOs and NCOs and sergeant's course and stuff, you hardly ever have that happening, right? They get to a point where they realize like, hey, I can get through this without falling asleep. It takes some mental resilience to get through it. Dadgum, tell my body to stop doing it. So, I feel like you get to that point where the refuse to lose is once you get through certain situations, everything else is minute that you thought was a big deal before. And then the aggressiveness, I think it's controlled initiative. I think the whole like chest pumping and like grunting and all this yelling and shouting is superficial. I think the initiative is if you can be aggressive and gain the initiative. So the same thing is hesitation kills, what we say, right? When you hesitate, it leads to bad outcomes. I think it's controlled initiative, being the first to react, and getting rid of all of the other superficial stuff that is a waste of time, waste of energy, I don't need to go out there and yell and grunt and scream at the top of my lungs and do war cries. I need to make the first move towards the enemy. Once I gain that territory, once I gain that ground, and I maintain it. And that's what that is. It's being aggressive, making decisions, and not wasting effort on the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, Jeff, you've dropped a lot of wisdom on us, and our time is complete here for part one. And we've already talked about you coming back and gracing us with part two, because we got more questions to draw all of your wisdom and insights. But before I let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the audience, what are you doing today? What are you involved in? And I know you've written some books. So what are you doing today? What services do you offer? Where can people find your books? How can they learn more about you? And how can people contact you?
Yeah, so I started writing in 2019, and I've loved it ever since. I mean, I love reading and writing, and so I just released my latest book, my latest anthology memoir called "You Just Survive." I'm so excited about this current journey right now. It's doing great right now, and a lot of great feedback from professors and Marines and leaders, and I'm having a blast with this little run for You Just Survive right now, setting up vendors and going to events and doing stuff. And so all my books are on Amazon. You can go to my website, jeffsabins.com, and I have information on there about my books and about You Just Survive, signed copies, Amazon copies, and then other projects I'm working on is sponsorships. So I've recently started doing sponsorships for ROTC units. So getting this information, getting my book, You Just Survive, in front of these ROTC cadets so they can kind of get some understanding on what it's like and what it feels like and read some firsthand knowledge. And we've already sponsored, I just started that this week, and we just already got 50 books sponsored for a high school down the road for ROTC. And so companies can sponsor books, and I'll give them the ROTC units, and they get shout outs and recognition. And I mean, I'm just trying to get as much information out to these people as possible, because knowledge is power. It's all about reading other people's experience and understanding what they went through, and help you make and base your decisions off of that. And then I do I do some speaking events for people, for corporate events and for schools, and go out there and talk about resilience and overcoming adversity. I talk about the things I've done in combat and with my son Carter and things along that line. And so I'm having a blast right now, focusing on this latest book, speaking to people, sharing as much knowledge as possible, and just having conversations like these. It's a ton of fun to go through this stuff, and I wish people could see every aspect of it. I mean, just last night, this person sent me a letter that I had wrote them when I was in Ramadi, and she had bought the book, and she had pulled this letter out. And she's like, and at that point, she was like, she was a little girl that a family I stayed with at one point, and she's like a sister to me. And I've always been, I've always watched her journey, and I've talked to her, and she's absolute family to me. And I had forgotten that I wrote this letter to her, and she sent me this letter where I had sent her when I was in Ramadi about, hey, how are things going? Can't wait to see you all when I get back. Looking forward to doing a barbecue with you all and whatnot. And I was in absolute tears reading that letter. That, it's just amazing. Just sharing information, having conversations, and talking to people. You just never know. You never know who is inspired or who learns something from what you say. So, I mean, I'm just having a blast right now, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, you're a natural teacher. And I can tell you this episode has exceeded I always knew it was going to be good, but that you've blown away my expectations. And this is going to be out there. And much like that letter you wrote, I think when you watch this episode, you'll realize, wow, I said a lot. I said more than I thought I would say. You know what I mean? You really dropped a lot of knowledge. So I can't thank you enough. I look forward to the next episode. And thank you. I can't say any more. I just thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate you doing this. And I think that this is going to touch the hearts and minds of a lot of people, and it's going to really affect future combat warriors, combat leaders, effectiveness. And I think lives are going to get saved and victories are going to be won with the help of what you're sharing with people. So I'm just privileged to have this platform and get folks like you out there. So with that, my friend, I thank you. I look forward to number 2. And for the audience out there, we are rounds complete for this episode. And have a great day, leaders. And as always, go forth and lead well.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at combatleadership.com. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient philosopher Plato. Only the dead have seen the end of war.